Happy New Year. Belated Merry Christmas. I don't think we've recorded in, it's been 2 weeks now, but the last we recorded, we were talking about college football and a progressive pressing approach to the games, just knowing that there wasn't really any massive Saturdays left, and we can feel better about the plays just because it's easier to break down the games when there's one or two on a day. I think we had about an 11-day stretch there where there was football on every day. I know I did well. I hope everybody else did well with that pressing strategy. What I'm going to talk about for this weekend's outlook, what I've learned in these recordings is that almost every time I'd be interested to see what my winning losing percentage is when I break down a game in depth and then make a pick, because I think most of the time that's the one game a week that we lose. So I'm going to break down games and I'm just going to post my picks when we get off of this recording. But uh, I'm going to go a few different places. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of these lines that moved. I'm going to some of these teams and what everybody should be looking at as far as top teams, as far rankings with takeaways and giveaways. I'm also going to talk about where the public is heavily betting on these handful of games, and then there's about four games that I'm going to get into. So that's where we're going. The first one I'm going to talk about is these lines and where they're moving. And I'm not trying to sway anybody's opinion on one side or the other. That's for you to decide. And you could take a look at my plays later. And if you're with me, great. If you're not, I wish you the best as well. The Colts Buffalo game. There is something that these odds makers are afraid of in moving the line. Buffalo, it's a 7-point spread. Buffalo's a 7-point favorite, but it's a minus 130 payoff. I actually saw that it shifted in one place to minus 125. I'm sorry, Buffalo is plus 110 on the payout, and the Colts are plus 7 at a minus 130 payout. That's saying that they've received a lot of Indy plays at the plus 7 when it shifts to 6.5. I mean, I'm surprised it hasn't shifted already. But if it shifts to 6.5, that'll balance out these odds a little bit more, and it'll go down to probably minus 110, or there might even be one team that's even money, and then minus 110 or 115 on the other side. But if you like the Bills and you think that they're going to win by 7, take them now and don't wait. Plus 110 is a great place to be. At this point, if you don't like the Bills and you want that half a point, if you don't like the Bills at 7 and you still want to play the Bills, I would wait for it to drop to 6.5. Although you're going to give up a little bit of juice on that one. As far as the other one goes, I was looking at the Rams and Seattle game, and that one really surprised me because there's a lot of action. That there's about 58% of the public money is on the Rams right now, and it was plus 3.5 for the Rams, and the payoff is minus 120 there. Seattle is even, laying 3.5 points. That game, if you look at the history between those two teams, the history shows that it is not going to be a 3.5 point margin on either side. Whoever wins that game is going to win it by more than 3.5. So if you are a believer in Seattle, I would take it now, because when it goes down to 3, it's probably going to go to minus 115. If you're a believer in the Rams at minus 120, I don't think the game is going to be decided by 3.5 points. If you were to play the Rams, you're better off playing the money line. This is not going to be a field goal game or a 3.5 point game. And I'll get into some of what I see with that game in a little bit. A lot of lopsided odds. The Baltimore and Tennessee game, when you look at that, that's Baltimore. The last I saw, Baltimore was a 3-point favorite, and it was minus 125 with Tennessee being plus 3, and it was paying plus 105. So if you're a Tennessee player, take the points. There's a lot of value there. If you're a Baltimore player, the only true value you're going to find there is if you get a reverse spread, or you wait for it to go 3.5. And when I say reverse spread, if you go onto Bovada or whatever site you choose, you have the option to lay additional points. So if you wanted to take Baltimore and say Baltimore by 6.5, you'll probably get a plus 300 payout there. And if you think Baltimore is going to win the game, there's probably a place in those reverse spreads where you can lay 1 point, just go Baltimore minus 1, Baltimore minus 1.5, and you probably get paid plus 150 there. So I look at those reverse spreads quite a bit. when we get into these playoff games, especially if I believe an underdog is going to win, then it just becomes, well, by how much? And usually in these playoffs, a lot you don't really see playoff games very often go into overtime, or you do see them decided by a field goal. But in most cases, when the favorite loses, it's because the underdog came in, punched him in the mouth, and just rolls him. So if you're on any underdog, I would recommend putting your unit on your and taking the points. But I would strongly recommend look at laying some additional points and taking them in reverse, because uh, there's value to be made, and we're really running out of time. So those are the main line movements. When I look at these teams and I look at the games, I thought that this was really interesting. I just went down the line, and I stopped when I got down to number 10, but I thought that it would be of value to look through the top teams as far as takeaways go. And all these teams that I'm naming are roughly two takeaways a game, and there's very few that separates the top from the bottom. But of the teams that are in the playoffs, Pittsburgh is number 2 in the league for takeaways, Buffalo number 3 in the league, New Orleans number 4, Indy 5, Tampa 6, Tennessee 8, Washington is number 9, and Baltimore is number 10. And again, these teams are all averaging right around 2, somewhere between 1.8 and 2.5 takeaways uh, per game. Now, when you go and you look at the top teams that give it away, this is where there should be some red flags and lights and sirens and whistles that tell you uh, really what games you should be looking at. I thought this was interesting. So the number one team for giveaways of who's in the playoffs currently, Washington is number 4 in the league with 27 takeaways on the season. Or I'm sorry, with 27 giveaways on the season. The Rams are number 8 in the league with 25 giveaways, potentially with a injured quarterback. And if he does play, he's recovering from a thumb injury. Doesn't sound good with a quarterback's throwing thumb, but 25 giveaways. Buffalo is number 12 in the league for giveaways. Chicago is number 13 in the league for giveaways with 22 on the season. Pittsburgh is, I think Pittsburgh ranked 18 in the league, so I'm gonna stop there. But of the teams that are still available, these are the teams that are top for takeaways and giveaways. So if we match the two of them up, Buffalo is number 3 for taking it away, but they're also, of what's left in the playoffs, number 3 for giving it away. And that's the one that jumped off the page. Washington is number 1 for giving it away, but they're also number 9 for taking it away. So where do you find your balance? I don't know. These are just interesting numbers, and when you put them together, it should give you some type of an answer or a red flag to walk away. Uh, then I was looking at who are the best teams for protecting the ball of who's available or of who's left in the playoffs. And what I came up with was Tennessee and Indianapolis. Tennessee, Indianapolis, Cleveland, New Orleans, Seattle, Baltimore, and Pittsburgh. I stopped there because they were within the top 10 for ball protection and not giving the ball away. Then after that, the jump goes up. It goes up much further. But I thought that made a lot of sense there. So Tennessee's the number 1 team for ball security, playing against Buffalo, who is number 3 at giving it away, but also the number 3 team in this playoff for giving it away. So Buffalo lives off of getting the turnover. They're vulnerable to giving it away, and they're playing against a team that likes to take the ball away. So I'm sorry, I'm mistaking on Tennessee and Buffalo, but um, I think everybody gets it. I wanted to run through those because it makes a lot of sense to look at the takeaways and the giveaways. All these teams, uh, they're in the playoffs. They're playoff teams. The Bears and Washington, those are teams with very mediocre records. But outside of that, every one of these teams could beat the next guy. And I don't know if they can beat the next guy 10 out of 10 times, but I think every one of these teams can beat the other guy. So we're looking at turnovers. We're looking at who's going to turn over, and we're looking at who's not going to turn it over. And that's a very important statistic when you get into this playoff action. And then is everybody good there? Did anybody want me to go in a little bit further on that stuff, or I kind of threw a lot out there for these numbers. All right, then I'm going to jump into some games. I'm going to talk about Seattle and the Rams. So there's a few different pieces I was looking at with this game. Seattle, in their wins, outside of the Niners game, where they only won by 3, Seattle's average win margin is 9.09 points a game. So if you believe Seattle's going to win, they're going to cover. So if you're on the Seattle side of it, they are absolutely going to cover this spread. When you break down the last game or the last 2 games that the Rams and Seattle played each other, the first time they played each other, it took 2 Russell Wilson interceptions for the Rams to beat them. The part that is a little alarming is the Rams in 2 games have sacked Russell Wilson of Seattle 11 times. But even with those 11 sacks, these 2 teams have pushed. They've each won 1, lost 1 against one another. But I believe in the one game was 6 sacks and the other game was 5 sacks. So it took 5 sacks or 6 sacks and 2 interceptions for the Rams to beat Seattle. And I think Seattle at this point is probably playing the best defense that they've played of the year. I think that they just kind of coasted through the rest of the last 4 or 5 games. But now when you go on the Rams side, what I like about the Rams is, I'm actually kind of supporting the Seattle pick a little bit. The Rams in their losses, their losses they pretty much average 6 points a game margin of defeat. So again, if you believe in Seattle, the statistics say that they're going to win by an average of 9, and the Rams are going to lose by an average of 6. And again, it took 6 sacks and 2 interceptions for the Rams to beat Seattle and Russell Wilson. But at the same time, the Rams have the ability to control the line of scrimmage, which can be very scary, especially when you're getting your quarterback sacked. I mean, of those 6 sacks, all it takes is one of them to be a fumble and go in the back of the end zone, and it changes the whole momentum of the game. So I think you can count on the Rams sacking Russell Wilson at least 4 times in this game. The only question is, where's the ball security going to be? And then the question becomes Jared Goff coming off of if he plays. So if he doesn't play, well, I think we all know where we're going with that. If he plays, then the question mark becomes the thumb. And how does that affect him? Because a quarterback's throwing thumb, that's kind of a big deal. I would think if it's not fully recovered, there's going to be an interception, there's going to be a fumble. So without saying it, I think everybody can see what side I'm leaning on that game. This next game, this is my favorite play of the week. I'm going to post it as a part of the picks when I'm done. But I'm looking at the Indianapolis Buffalo game. So there's 2 key matchups that I'm really looking at with this game. I'm looking at the way that the Colts are able to run the ball, own the line of scrimmage, and control the time of possession when they're on their game, versus the Bills' rush defense, which it's marginal. I mean, it's a marginal rush defense. But then you go with the way that the Bills can just, when Josh Allen gets going and what they're capable of doing with the pass and some of the speed that they have. And at this point, they're running with 2 really good running backs. And so there's a lot going on the Bills pass versus the Colts pass. But then you get into, the Colts run D is actually better than their run offense. So, and the Bills are not very good at running the ball anyway. So you look there, and then I look at the turnovers between them. The Colts have taken the ball away 25 times and only given it away 15 times. You look at the Bills, they've taken it away 26 times, but given it away 22 times. I think when you look at like the last 5 games that each team has had, it's kind of a push as to their strength of competition and where they're going. I think if you look at the Colts' last 3 games, they've scored a ton of points. You also have to consider the opponents they played. The Miami win, that was pretty sweet. But in any case, when you look at the Colts' losses, or I'm sorry, you look at the Bills' losses, they've if you take the Chiefs and the Tennessee game out of the picture, they really have had a really impressive season. They lost in a shootout to Zona, but Allen also turned the ball over. There were 2 turnovers that it took in order to keep that game even, and then, really the only what it took for Kansas City to beat Buffalo was to get ahead 13 to nothing, and there's nobody that's catching up to them. It's just at that point, it's how many points do the Chiefs want to score, and then Tennessee really exploited their mediocre run defense, and that's how they beat them. So uh, it's in order to beat Buffalo, it's going to take turnovers, it's going to take getting on top, or it's going to take just a tremendous run game. And the Colts are capable of those things. It's just what side of it do you like? It's a 7-point spread, but then you go back to the juice and you look at to take those 7 points, you got to lay minus 130. So again, my recommendation here is I don't think that this is going to be I don't think that this is going to be a 7-point game. So I think if the Colts win, it's not going to be by 7. If Indy wins, I think it's going to be a lot bigger than the Colts win. So what I'm recommending here is if you are on the Indy side, if you are of the belief that Indy is going to win this game, like I said, I don't think that this is going to be Indy winning by 3 or Phil Rivers coming down the field. I think that if Indy wins this game, it's going to be because it's total domination. They get a turnover, they control the time of possession, and they just really come out there and take over right from the beginning. So I'm not saying that that's going to happen, but that's what it'll take for Indy to win this game. I don't think that Buffalo's going to win by 6 because I don't think that Indy's going to not answer the scoring as quickly as Buffalo does. Rivers is a good quarterback. They have a great run. They got some good receivers. Indy still has an awesome O-line. This is going to be a great game to watch. But at this point, I don't. At 6.5, Buffalo, I think Buffalo could win by 6.5, but I just don't like 7 in this game. Again, I'll post my play here shortly. The next one, this one, this one gets kind of crazy. This is the Chicago against New Orleans game, and I believe it was at 10 when I started looking at the game, but now it's 10.5. The Bears do not do a very good job at taking the ball away. They've only taken the ball away 18 times. And as far as their points allowed versus points scored, there's this belief that the Bears have a great defense, and it always shocks me when I look at what their stats are. But I think that that's just what everybody sees when they look at that logo and the history of the Chicago Bears as defense. And they were a game away from the Super Bowl a few years ago, and they were in a Super Bowl a few years ago, and defense was what did it. But they've allowed 23 points a game, but they've only answered that with 23 points a game. But if you were to take the Bears average margin of loss, take the Packers games out. So I'm not looking at the Packers games because against the Packers they lost by 19 and 16. But if you take those games out, the Bears average margin of defeat is 6.83 points per game. Well, this game is a 10.5 point game. So that makes it pretty interesting. Now, if you look at the Saints, they have kind of had an odd season because they had the beginning of the season where they pretty much dominated Tampa. They had some pretty good wins early. Then Drew Brees got hurt, and then they came in with Taysom. And Drew Brees really only been back 2 games, but they're early in the season. I'm sorry, a little bit earlier in the season than these last 5 games. They were only averaging a win margin of about 3.3. That was Taysom Hill. So the 1-game sample of Drew Brees being back, this past game, there was 6 Alvin Kamara touchdowns. There was no other player on the field that contributed. So the Saints are coming off of a blowout win, but I don't know that you can call that a great anything performance, but a running back playing out of his mind, and Alvin Kamara is not playing this weekend, or at least he's a game time decision the last that I read. So in this game, I don't really know which way to go. This game feels like a walk away to me. I don't really like anybody winning by 10.5 in the playoffs. At least that just doesn't feel safe. But at the same time, I don't see how the Bears are going to be able to score points to stay with them because Drew Brees is one of the best quarterbacks that has ever played. He's going to find players, and I think that Mitch Trubisky is going to have a little bit of problems. The Saints and the Bears played each other earlier in the year. and I believe it went into overtime. It was a very close game, but that was Nick Foles. That was Nick Foles, and the Saints fumbled the ball 3 times in that game. So I don't care who you are, you fumble the ball and give it to the other team 3 times in one game. It took that for the Bears to force a overtime loss. So you give that ball back to Drew Brees, not Taysom Hill, 3 times, and you guys can put those pieces together on where that goes. But that game's a difficult one, just because of the points. The other one that's interesting, that I'm going to talk about a little bit is Washington and Tampa. Um, that one I'm just a little confused by, because I'm questioning whether Washington can put up the points, but I don't think Tampa is going to be able to put up the points. I don't. There's an over under of 42, and that's really the part of the game that I find the most interesting, because I I this one could be a defensive battle. As much as we think about Brady and all these weapons, his O line sucks. That Tampa O line is not good, and you're going up against what I think is a top 5 D line in football with Washington. And Washington is a better team at, or just as good a team at taking the ball away as Tampa is. The only problem is they like to give the ball away. Alex Smith won't give the ball away, and he's only been playing a short amount of time this season, versus that whole Dwayne Haskins fiasco. Although I think cutting Haskins kind of brought that team together. What we saw on Sunday night with the Eagles thing, putting in the 3rd string quarterback, and that's not the Washington team that we're going to see this weekend. So that one is 8.5. It's 9 in some places. I'm not really feeling it on either side of that spread. But what I am feeling is if that over under, right now there's a lot of action on the over. So I think that by kickoff, that's going to be at 43 and a half. And I like it there, because when you think about it, if Washington can't score, if they can't put up the points at all, 35-7, we win. I mean, 35-7, the under wins. I don't know that there's a need for Tampa to put up 45 points in this game. It's only going to take 24 points to beat Washington in this game. So that being said, when you only have to put up 24 points, well, if the other team, that makes it a much smaller margin. The number between 0 and 24. So then that makes that makes Tampa minus 8.5 or minus 9 even more unattractive to me. But again, I'm just thinking, if the game is 35-7, if the game is 28-10, if the game is 28-14, I could just see it being there. But this might be a game where Washington's just not going to be able to put up the points to be able to support that over under. So I'll just throw it out there now. I said I wasn't going to, but I'm not picking a team here. I'm picking a number. So I like the under in this Washington-Tampa game, even if Tampa blows them out 35-0, 35-10, or we don't want 35-10, but that's where I land on that one. And that's about it. I mean, that was a good earful. I don't really have a ton more. These games after this weekend should get pretty easy, but every wild card weekend in football, every year in the football playoffs, there's an underdog that comes out and wins outright. And there's a couple of them this weekend, and I think every underdog is pretty interesting. I'm not really going to get in the business of playing the dogs, but some of these numbers look better for dogs than they do for favorites. And I don't think we would be surprised. Like, we'd be surprised if Washington beat Tampa. We'd probably be surprised if the Bears beat New Orleans. But if the Rams beat Seattle or Indy beat Buffalo, is anybody really going to be surprised by that? I wouldn't even be surprised if Cleveland beat Pittsburgh. I'm not saying I'm playing that, but it wouldn't surprise me. So look at some of these dogs, and again, if you like the dog, they're probably going to win big and take control early. So think about some of those reverse spreads and finding some value. If you're betting full unit on the game and the points, look, bet a half unit, bet a quarter unit on some of the reverse spread lines. I bet I had money line, and I also had some of the reverse lines on Ohio State last weekend. And I know I'm not going to say I told you so, but it was a great thing as a fan and as an investor. But what else? What do you guys got for me?
Yeah, looked in the
Man.
questions. I didn't see any new questions in there.
All right. Elliot, you got anything? Andrew, Muhammad, you guys always have questions.
Hey man, so you don't think Tampa covers the spread?
No, I'm not saying I don't think they cover the spread. I'm thinking I dug into that game over under. And
Yeah, okay.
I don't think Washington can score enough points to support 42 and a half over under.
I agree with that.
So when you go there, I don't think it's going to take more than 24 points to beat Washington. Bruce Arians has a far bigger ego than that, and I think you're probably safe taking Tampa and laying the points. I don't feel super comfortable with it, just because Washington's got an incredible defense, an incredible pass rush, and we've seen games where Brady spends a lot of time on his back. And if you look at some of the games that Tampa has been in this year, Tampa lost to the Bears. They just outright lost to the Bears, and it's just out of left field, uncalled for, and nothing can explain it. So I just I just look at that Tampa game and I struggle to want to lay 8 points. And I have it in front of me right now. So Tampa Bay two blowouts the last couple games. But let's go to Atlanta. They won by 4. Let's go to Minnesota. They blew them out. But then you go back. Kansas City, they lost.
Yeah, we got some bad losses.
There's some bad losses in there. So I just don't know where that one's coming. And they didn't necessarily lose to teams that they should have lost to. They should have never lost to the Bears. Um, you know, 8.5 points, you're probably not going to get hurt. And I probably, if I had to play that side of it, I would. My approach to that game is I just don't feel great about the 42 and a half. But also, Tampa's put up 42 and a half. I just don't know if they do it here in this spot.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I don't know. Tampa seems like they've come together over the last couple games. And I don't know. I guess I'm a diehard Tampa fan, so it's hard to even bet on them in general. So
Yeah,
that's all I got on that.
You're right. They have come together in the last couple games, and I want to see Tampa in the Super Bowl. As a Chiefs
that would
fan,
be amazing.
As a Chiefs fan, I want to see Mahomes Brady. I mean, that's just, I think that would be a storybook baton passing, and they'd make movies about it in 30 years. But and you're right. In the last 4 games, they have gotten it together. But you got to kind of look at that and wonder against who. They went against Atlanta, fired their coach. They went against Detroit, fired their coach. They went against Atlanta before that, and they only won by 4. And again, that's a team that fired their coach. They went against Minnesota. So yes, the last 4 games they look a lot better, but they're not playing. The last 4 games they haven't played teams with a tremendous pass rush. So, they went against the Chiefs and they lost that game because the Chiefs, regardless of what anybody thinks, the Chiefs have a good pass rush. They went against the Rams. Prior to that, they have a fantastic pass rush, probably the best pass rusher in the league. And then, they're prior to that, they won against Carolina. Carolina doesn't have much of a pass rush, so of course they blew them out. They went against New Orleans for the second time and lost 38-3. So I just look at their losses, and their losses have come against teams with good pass rushes. And Washington's, again, you can build an argument that their pass rush is the best in the league.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. Well, I guess we'll see what happens. That's the only one I had a question on. I don't like the Indianapolis one is kind of wild to me. So
yeah,
I'm interested to see what your numbers say.
Well, like I said, I think the Indianapolis game, if Indy wins it, they're going to blow them out. If Buffalo wins it, it'll be a small guy.
Yeah. And are you touching the Pittsburgh Cleveland? Or are you leaving that alone completely? I noticed you didn't speak on it a whole lot.
I didn't speak on it a whole lot because the spread shifted to 6. But it's hard to, even though the Pittsburgh had a little hiccup in the middle of the season, it's hard to bet against them because their offense is what looked really bad in those games earlier in the season. They have a fantastic rush defense, and that's what Cleveland does best. So if they can't run the ball, and Pittsburgh knows Baker's coming with it, and now that the spread has shifted to 6, when it opened at 7.5 and 7, I wasn't there. But no, I'm probably going to post that one, and I'm leaning toward it. Pittsburgh just seems too easy in that one, that they come together with a better coach and everything else in the playoffs. So I'm leaning Pittsburgh on that one. I'm just not there yet.
Right on. Okay, man, I appreciate it as usual. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, yeah. All right. If there's nothing else, then I wish everybody a happy week, and let's cash some tickets. I'm gonna put up all the picks here in a little bit.
Thanks, brother, as always.
Yes, sir. Thank you guys for
Thanks
the
again.
support.
Appreciate you.
Yep.
Yep. See you next week.
Thank you, sir.